Hello and welcome to Card Jockey. This is a series of videos designed to give players a high-level view of each of the teams in the Diva format, just to look and see if that team may appeal to you. I know there's a lot of deck lists and everything out there, but there's not a lot of high-level generic information on each of the teams. So the plan with this series is to give players a view high level, regardless of who your center and who your assists are. Just some general tips for what the teams play like, how they play, and what to expect if you start using them. So, who is Card Jockey? Card Jockey is a team that is very heavily reliant on their piece. Now, granted, most teams in Diva format are, but Card Jockey is far and away the most reliant on their piece. It is basically ingrained in everything they try to do. The game plan for Card Jockey is to pretty much filter through their deck as quickly as possible, pull out all the ones and twos, leave only the level threes and the spells behind so that when you use your endless punchline, you're hitting a 3 and getting 2 extra attacks to get that extra damage in. And as we look through the cards here, you should see a theme in that most of these cards are kind of designed, both the Elrigs and the Signy are kind of designed to do that as much as possible, just to help their game plan and get through all of those low level cards, just to leave all the good stuff in their deck. So, since Card Jockey is very heavily defined by their piece, regardless of who you use in the center, let's take a look at it. So, there's a lot of text on here. It can get a little confusing. The gist of it is, as long as you have all three members of Card Jockey on the field and your center is level 3, you gain the ability to attack while downed, and you can attack up to 3 times per turn. So that's basically 2 free damage that Card Jockey has access to that no other team has. The downside of this is that the first time you attack, you have to shuffle your deck and flip the top card. If it is a level 1 Signy, you only get to attack once. If it's a level 2 Signy, you only get to attack twice. So you want to aim for the 3s and the spells just to get the full value out of this piece. Since this is a 0 cost piece, it's still very strong. I mean, even if you only hit a 2, that's still 1 free damage. That's pretty much on par with the other team pieces. So hitting a 2 isn't the end of the world, but obviously you want to hit a 3. And you'll see as we look into the Elrigs and the support pieces that a lot of the cards that Card Jockey favors are all about getting the 1s and 2s out of the deck as quickly as possible. Now, before we get too deep into the strategies that Card Jockey likes to use, I would like to address that Card Jockey, as far as deck building is concerned, is extremely complicated. Much more so than all of the other teams, due mostly to the fact that their endless punchline is defined by having their deck constructed a certain way. So if you are building a Card Jockey deck as a deck builder, it's a dream. You have so many different options. You have so many things you need to think about as you're optimizing your deck, that you need to focus on not only the levels of the Signy, the colors of the Signy that you're using, and how all of those interact together. If you are coming at this from a perspective of somebody who doesn't care much about deck building, this may not be the team for you just because it's so very intensive on it. You can potentially use lists that you find online and play them to good effect, and you can use at least the filtering aspect of it to try to filter through the deck. And it's sort of a combo deck in that way, that it does try to pull things out of the deck and use, the cards left in the deck almost as fuel. But if you want to get the full value out of Card Jockey, I think deck building is a very important aspect of it. And it's something that should not be overlooked, that there is a great deal of complexity that goes along with it. These two cards in particular, VJ Wolf Laser and MC Lion Dig, kind of illustrate a little bit with some of the levels of complexity that you'll be seeing. So VJ Wolf Laser it's sort of a long way of saying enter charge 2, with the caveat that you have to look at the top 5, put up to 2 cards that share a color with your center into the enter zone, and the rest go on the bottom. So VJ Wolf specifically wants cards that share colors with your center Elric, and for that reason, a lot of Card Jockey decks tend to skew towards whatever color of the center you're using. So if you're using the MC Lion center, they'll skew white. If you're using Lovett, they'll skew red, etc. MC Lion Dig, on the other hand, which is also an extremely good level 1 assist, and these, if you're running Lovett, you'll use both of these assists. If you're using Wolf, you'll use Lion Dig, etc., etc. Like, these are 2 assists you want to be using. MC Lion Dig has you look at the top 5 cards again. You reveal 1 Signy that shares a color with your center, so that's in line with Wolf, but you also reveal one that does not share a color I guess it's more accurately, it shares a color with a assist Elrig you have. So now, if you're running MC Lion Dig, not only do you want to share colors with your center, you want to explicitly not share colors with your center. So it causes this weird sort of discrepancy between you want your deck to pull a certain way, but now MC Lion is having you pull a different way to get maximum value out of it. And it's trying to strike and figure out where this balance goes that leads to a lot of the very interesting deck building decisions that have to go into playing Card Jockey. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, you may be wondering which of the three Card Jockey centers would appeal the most to you. So we're going to start with MC Lion. We're going to go in release order. Lion is the first one that came out. She has an enter ability that you can look at the top 4 cards of your deck, add 2 of them to your hand, and 2 will go in your trash. This is contrary to most of the other filtering that happens in this deck, because most of it you'll select cards from it and then the rest will go on the bottom. But importantly, this actually puts them in the trash, which A, decreases your deck size to make it easier to thin in the future. But it also means that of those 4 that you're looking at, you can choose the 2 best, most relevant pieces out of them and not have to feel obligated to choose just the lower level ones to get them out of the deck. She also has a once per game ability that whenever she attacks, if the attack is nullified, basically if your opponent does not take damage, you can down a level 2 assist Elrig to restand her and attack again. This is basically a almost guaranteed damage to get through just by having all of your Signy at level 2, your assists at level 2. You can pretty much pull guards out and get that last point of damage if necessary. The Lion build tends to skew more mid-range just to have options for a little bit of control, but it has a little bit of aggression when needed. White cards in general tend to do a lot of card filtering, which is why I think a lot of people will skew even when Wolf comes out. At the time of recording, VJ Wolf is not an option, but I feel like even after she comes out, Lion will probably be the most popular Card Jockey center because, like I said, a lot of white cards tend to skew towards card filtering, which is what Card Jockey wants to do anyway. Plus, the Card Jockey specific Signy, which we will get more details on in the moment, is also white. So as I mentioned, that the decks tend to skew more toward the center color, and as Lion is a white Elrig, having the PRJ as a white card makes that relevant as well. Now, for DJ Lovett, she has an action ability that you can choose to down her. If your opponent's center Elrig is level 3 or more, you get to basically target a card from their enter zone, put it in their trash. She has an enter ability to vanish a target Signy on your opponent's field, which is relatively standard for red things. She also has a once per game, similar to Lion's, where you can down and up level 2 Elrig to up this Elrig, although hers is unconditional and you can only do it on your action phase. Essentially, this combos with her action ability so that once both of your assists are level 2, you can down her to burn an enter. You can down one of your assists to stand her up, down her again to burn a second enter, and then down the other one. Basically, you can burn 2 enter per turn and then still use her to attack. That's sort of where the logic behind this goes. As a red Elrig, and again, with the idea that Card Jockey likes to skew towards whatever color the center is, DJ Lovett is a much more aggressive build. She favors, there's a lot of really good aggressive cards, like Lancelot obviously is sort of extremely prevalent in the format, and Lovett works very well with them. So she tends to come out of the gate fast, which is a little bit contrary to her ability. Her action ability requires your opponent's Elrig to be level 3 or greater. So if you do go first and you kind of come out of the gate and get first, you actually don't potentially get value out of that right away, which is a little unfortunate. Partially for this reason, I feel like DJ Lovett is a little bit has an identity crisis where she wants to always go second if possible, just to get the most value out of her action ability. Because again, with the endless punchline, she can attack while down. So if you on your punchline turns, you get a free enter burn. Please don't forget to use that if you do play DJ Lovett. So she wants to go as fast as possible, but she also wants to go second. So there's a little bit of an identity crisis there. She also tends to run out of steam by the end of the game, which is a little bit of a problem. So at least in the current this current format we have, DJ Lovett is a little bit underperforming. I think there's definitely some ways to unlock her, but she's a little bit more complicated. She's a lot harder to use than Lion, just because she lacks the free potential damage for Lions once per game. but that doesn't mean that she's not good. I mean, there's definitely some value to be had there. She's just a little bit more challenging than Lion coming out of the gate. As I mentioned at the time of recording, VJ Wolf is actually not available yet in English as a center L-rig. She will be coming in the next set, Stand Up Diva, which should be here in about a month. But we can look at her Japanese version just to see what her abilities are and potentially do some analysis on that as well. She has an action ability, much like DJ Lovett does, except hers, you down her to enter charge 2, so she can really fuel up your resources. She has an enter ability that until end of turn, she actually gains a constant ability to give your Signy plus 5k power until end of turn. She also has a once per game ability that until the end of turn, this L-Rig gains the action ability to down one of your up level 2 L-Rigs to up this L-Rig. So the same thing that Lovett has, where you can down a level 2 assist to restand her. Again, it's basically the same way where Lovett, you're standing her to, you're downing your assist to stand her to burn your enter. The difference is for VJ Wolf, instead of burning your opponent's enter, you're generating your own enter. Otherwise, the two they're almost opposite sides of the same coin. They also have two slightly different effects where Lovett will vanish any Signy and VJ Wolf's will give your Signy plus 5k power. So obviously the enter ability for VJ Wolf is not nearly as important. Plus 5k for the most part usually does not matter. Especially when it's just on your turn, unless you're trying to hit some weird Lancer thresholds, which is it's potentially because again this Signy is in green, so your deck will probably be focusing on green. So there are some options that there are Signy who want to hit certain power thresholds, so that could help in that case. The other thing of note here is that at least in the current versions of these two cards, I feel like VJ Wolf's ability to gain 2 enter unconditionally versus DJ Lovett's ability to burn 1 enter if your opponent's L-Rig is level 3. VJ Wolf is just much more usable in that case. So I personally will be switching to VJ Wolf once she comes out for a few reasons, which we will get to in the future, but partially just because she feels like a much more complete package than Lovett does. And she skews green, which is a color that I like to play, even though it's not the best in WIXOSS. That's the color that I tend to prefer playing. So there are some very good options that VJ Wolf has, and we will go over those as well. You'll see a lot more also once we get into the assists. Part of the reason why I will favor VJ Wolf is just because the combination of the Lion and the Lovett assists are both very good. And really the problem with running both Lion Center and Lovett Center is that you lose access to them as assists. But if you have VJ Wolf, you can use both of their assists, and both of their assists are extremely powerful. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get there in a second. But before we get into those really good assists, let's just talk about VJ Wolf. I'm just going to highlight the 2 most commonly used assists for each of the L-Rigs. There's a lot of different options. Some of them are very good as alternates. Actually, of these 2, I actually don't use Sync. I prefer Mirage, but we won't get into that. This just will give you an idea of what potential strategies and what the commonly used L-Rigs are for each of the 3 different characters. So VJ Wolf Laser we've talked about. She is part of the reason why the card jockey decks tend to skew towards whatever color their center is, because you want to match that center with VJ Wolf. Not only does it pull them out of the deck, but it gives you enter. Like there's 2 very good reasons to hit as many of those matching colors as possible, especially on the lower end. I feel like a lot of card jockey decks will match most, if not all, of their level 1s with their center, just to make sure that you'll always have options to pull those out of the deck. VJ Wolf Sync is most people's preferred level 2. Her enter ability, she looks at the top card of your life cloth, which is unique at the moment. You can choose to either shuffle that into that deck and pull out 2 life cloth, or you can leave it there and just pull 1 life cloth after you shuffle. You're always going to be plus 1 life cloth with Sync. It's just a question of whether or not you get a life burst. You may get a potential extra life burst out of it, depending on if the top card of your cloth has one. You may keep it there. If it does not, you can shuffle it in and have another shot at getting one. The reason I highlighted this as well is because this also goes into the card jockey deck building theory that you want to have as many life bursts as possible on your level 3s. This is something that I do personally in my decks, is I don't have any life bursts on level 1s outside of the servants, which you kind of have to. I don't have any on level 2s either. They're all on level 3s because if you're keeping them in the deck anyway, you can pull them out with Wolf, whenever you finally do use wolf, you have a much higher likelihood of actually hitting those life bursts, which basically gives you extra value out of your opponent dealing damage to you. And it's sort of a 1-2. It's not an intuitive combo that you would see necessarily, but if you do that, if you set up your threes so that they're more likely to have life bursts, then when you use sync, you're much more likely to actually get those life bursts into your life cloth. And that's a nice little 1-2 punch. For DJ Lovett, you'll notice a trend with both of these. DJ Lovett Scratch, when she enters, it's free to grow, which is excellent. Vanish target signaling with power 10k or less. That's going to be basically all level 1s and level 2s, so just a free damage, free lane clear, decent value out of basically a free to grow. DJ Lovett Crossfade is by far the most level 2 Lovett version that we have. Her enter ability is vanish target signaling in her opponent's field. It's got main phase and attack phase timing, so she can both save you a damage and clear a lane for 2 enter. You can pay an extra 4 to crush a life cloth for free, basically. And doing so on your opponent's turn is also extremely valuable because it really helps you dodge potential harmful life bursts. Because if you're crushing it on your opponent's attack phase, it's much less likely that they will hit a life burst that affects anything you have on the board, if you even have anything on the board. So being able to crush that on the opponent's turn is extremely powerful. For Lion's assists, we already talked about MC Lion Dig, basically a way to add cards to your hand as long as they match the color requirements for them. It's a little bit more complicated just because she wants to both match a center and an assist, so you have to figure out good proportions for your deck to do so, which we will get into some simple ways to do that in a moment. But it's just white assists tend, especially at level 1, tend to give a little bit of card advantage, that type of thing. So MC Lion is in that vein as well. Her level 2 that is extremely powerful, MC Lion Disrespect. It's attack phase timing, 2 to grow, target signaling on your opponent's field, cannot attack until end of turn. You can discard 2 cards to do that again, and then you can pay 3 more enter to do it a third time. So if you have 2 cards you don't need in your hand and you have a total of 5 enter, you can basically say to your opponent, none of your signature get to attack this turn. That's extremely relevant for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it protects the damage, but the fact that it makes it so that they can't attack as opposed to like a Madoka Clap, which downs them, the fact that they are now standing and cannot attack means that they are potentially susceptible to things like a Deafening Inferno life burst or other life bursts that only target upped Signy. The Signy that cannot attack are still upped by definition. So you have more options and flexibility to do that. So as you can see with the MC Lion line and the DJ Lovett line, all 4 of those assists especially are very powerful. And if you run Wolf as your center, you gain access to all of them, as opposed to the Wolf assists are good, but they're not nearly as impactful as all of these. So that is why I personally will prefer to run Wolf. So we've gone through most of the Elric deck cards that you will want to use. The assist piece you use will depend heavily on the deck that you're using, so I won't go into too much detail. Basically, you'll have your assists, you'll have Endless Punchline, and then whichever assist piece you prefer to use. So for the main deck, I won't go, as I mentioned before, each of the decks will skew heavily on whatever color your center is. So there's not a whole lot of overlap in there. There's some generically good cards you can kind of fit everywhere. But the only ones I will talk about are cards that absolutely go in every Card Jockey deck, regardless of center. So PRJ Map is the Card Jockey specific Signy. Each team has their own special Signy that they use. And Card Jockeys is one of the best for what they want to do, or even just in general. She has an ongoing ability that your opponent cannot guard unless they pay an additional 2 enter. So if you use it on a punchline turn, it severely taxes them if makes them completely unable to guard any of your attacks, which is very valuable. She also has an enter ability to pay a white, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 spell and 1 white Signy, and add them to your hand. This is more situational, partially because of the card filtering issues that we've talked about, that you kind of want to have as many spells in your deck as possible, so pulling a spell out isn't always the best idea. Usually at the point she comes out, you've done a lot of filtering already, so it's not always relevant that she will hit a level 1 or level 2 to pull out. It's good to fill your hand for sure. There is definitely some value to be had there. She also, because of this, if you're running a Lion or Wolf center, because she only pulls out white Signy, you're probably less likely to hit something like that. So there is some potential decreased value if you're running one of those as your center, so just keep that in mind as well. But overall, just because of the constant ability where she's taxing guards, she's pretty much mandatory as a 4 of in any card jockey team center deck. The only other Signy that I wanted to highlight specifically in this video are the multicolored Signy. I think they are extremely good in card jockey specifically. They're generally like okay cards, like you usually are fine running them in whatever deck you're running. But for card jockey, because of the very weird and heavy color requirements, they're extremely good. If you have them aligned with whatever your center is, like if you're running Lion and you run both Percival and Triumph, now you have a lot of ways for VJ Wolf to hit. And in addition to VJ Wolf being able to hit on those colors, she also can enter charge you in the other colors if you need them as well. Same thing with MC Lion. If you run the MC Lion Dig Assist and you have, if say you have a Lovett center and you're running Percival and Pandata, you can actually hit two Percivals on that because one Percival as red will match Lovett, one of them as a white will match your Lion Assist. So you can use the same card to do multiple functions to basically act as a almost a fodder in your deck as something that you will target to pull out of the deck. And again, it acts as multi-enter. The bodies are reasonably big. You know, you can't vanish them through Romail. If you run the level 2 ones, you can't vanish them through Lancelot. They're 10Ks, they're beefy, they're big. So they're cards that are generally good to have. And especially as more sets come out and more interesting options come out, I feel like these cards in particular will be overshadowed. But if you are playing card jockey, these are cards that you want to look out for and potentially have slots in your deck to fill them. The last card I wanted to talk about is Good Dig, which is a card jockey, not specific, but it skews toward card jockey. You pay 2 on her, look at the top 7. If you're playing card jockey, you just get 2 of them. You don't even have to reveal them and put them in your hand, and the rest go on the bottom in a random order. This is one of the ways that you can really fuel your endless punchline. You can really cut through the deck, pull out the cards you need. You can use it to pull guards out if you need them. You can good dig into good dig, which is something you can't normally do if you're not in card jockey. Because normally, if you're not running card jockey, good dig only pulls Signy. But if you're in card jockey, you can dig into a dig and kind of keep the chain going. It obviously will cost enter, so that's a little expensive, but it's an extremely good card. It gets you pretty much anything that you need. It's another card that I absolutely will run 4 of in any card jockey build just because of the versatility that it provides. So hopefully after all that you have a good high level view of not only what Card Jockey does, but what each versions of Card Jockey do, what the centers are, what their strengths are, their weaknesses. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, any of that stuff, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one.